How did I start? Well, it began with a chance meeting with Norman in 1969, and he offered me a place. The first job was to turn the bed into a drawing board and to make it into a place where people could come, and people did come. Well, the project that got Norman asking for more help was the Olsen Amenity Building. It was a part office and part, well, amenity is the right word. It was a place where the dock workers could come and change and have recreation and food. So it was a two-story building. The ground floor was essentially for the dock workers, and the first floor was for the management. The client, Olsens, were very, very pleased with what it did, and it had this great idea that you didn't separate out the workforce from the management. So you mixed blue-collar workers with white-collar workers. It was the first time the practice had ever been involved in something of that scale, to look at an island in the Canary Islands. And a group of us went out there and actually assessed the situation on the ground. The central idea was to try and stop the island, or rather to encourage the island to develop in an ecological way. When Norman started learning to fly a glider, he was based on a very famous London gliding school, a place called Dunstable Downs. And the man who ran the gliding school, who was Norman's instructor, they hit upon the idea of doing a better project, doing a project that would actually improve the look of the gliding school and also be functional, and it would provide proper cover for the gliders. And that was a short project which I did with Norman. The two of us did it together, and we gave it to the gliding school, but I don't believe they actually took it any further, sadly. It was a group that had set themselves up to try and counter the results of unemployment and lack of work in that part of South Wales in the 1970s. The idea was to produce a sort of large social building which would house all sorts of different activities and encourage local businesses. It was quite a long journey on the train, but once Norman had learnt how to fly, he got very interested in the project. I think the journey time on the train was nearly 3 hours, and in a helicopter it was 45 minutes. That was a large and complex project for a site, what would I call it? It was a sort of a knuckle site in the south centre part of London. It was where a lot of roads and communication systems joined, and they wanted to develop it in order to produce a better everything, really, a better bus station, a better tube station, a better road circulation system. And it's a project that sadly didn't get realised in the form that we did it. He was a very charismatic man. It was one of these relationships that worked very well because he had a sort of what we would call an amanuensis, a young man who had really been convinced by his ideas, who then made it his life's work to write up his work. And he was called James Mellor. He was an Englishman. And by a sort of series of coincidences, he happened to be. We heard about him and we involved him in the office. We had a lovely period where he was could come to London, and where he would join in on projects. We would have meetings around the table, and Norman took him to the Sainsbury Centre. The client, who were a couple, Sir Robert and Lady Sainsbury, who had a very fine art collection. They wanted to leave their collection somewhere that they felt happy with, and the thing that convinced them was the Olsen Amenity Building. They were taken to see it, and they were completely in love with it from the moment they saw it. When we started a project, and the photographs are in some of the books, you see people sitting around the table. We haven't even started designing the building. But you start talking about the building with people who are going to have a major role in it. I mean, I I say this because conventionally at the time, it was all compartmented up. The architect would design the building and they'd give the drawing to the engineer who would then, you've probably heard Norman saying this, but then the engineer would sort of size it up and then he would pass it to the quantifier. You know, this is not the way we worked. I mean, that drawing there, which is the Sainsbury's Centre drawing, that's very much to do with explaining the scheme to the client. So that was one of many drawings, sort of almost like cartoons, partly to explain to ourselves, partly to explain to the client, and partly to explain to the staff. This woman here, who was one of the staff, you know, she needed to understand how we thought the building would work because she was going to make it, you know, she was part of the way it was going to be made to work. I think it's fair to say that this is quite unusual for a practice at this time in the 1970s to be doing this sort of, as I say, almost like cartoons, to explain to ourselves, to explain to the client, and to explain to the people using the building. One of the things I brought to the practice with these drawings is an idea about the life of the project, you know, how they would be used. Towards the end of my time there, people were starting to do computer drawings. Okay. And I think almost the last set of drawings I did, they said, but where are the computer drawings? That was a suitable moment, you know, to stop